So you have to be aware of the deficits. But I'll tell you, the big ones are all about admiration and affirmation and affection. And marriages that don't supply some of those needs, we all need more affirmation than we can probably receive. We all need someone to admire us and look up to us. And if those begin to decline, you become vulnerable to somebody who will pay attention to you.
Welcome to the Focus on the Family broadcast, helping families thrive.
Marriage is central to what we do here at Focus on the Family, John. We believe that marriage is the foundation of the family. And God's design for marriage is a relationship where both husband and wife are committed to loving and caring for one another for a lifetime. It's pretty much that simple. The problem is we're selfish creatures, and that selfishness pokes out in all kinds of ways. And I think at the end of the day, that's what God's trying to eliminate in the institution of marriage. Become more like me, become selfless. We recognize that problems come up and sometimes leave devastating results in marriage. Every day we receive calls and letters from people who are shattered in their marital issues. Why do I convey that? Because I don't want you to be embarrassed. If you need to contact us, we want you to call. Help is here for you through counseling. We have our Hope Restored Marriage Intensives, which it's designed to really come alongside you and be there. It's a 4-day intensive at Branson, Missouri. A wonderful program, 81% success rate post 2 years. So I can't think of a better program in the country to heal a broken marriage. And oftentimes what they're dealing with is infidelity and sexual issues. So today's program, we want to be bold and blunt with you so that you can affair-proof your marriage.
Yeah, we want you to stay alert to the potential problems that creep into a marriage and to avoid the dangers. And to do that, we've invited Dave Carter to join us. Dave is the pastor of counseling ministries at First Evangelical Free Church of Fullerton, California, and has written a number of books, including his most recent, which is Anatomy of an Affair.
Welcome to Focus, Dave.
Well, thank you for having me. Look forward to this.
Well, you have written about this. You have been a pastor for many, many years, helping couples deal with this issue. So you're coming loaded with experience, and I appreciate that. That's far more important to me than letters behind your name. Actually being at the ground level, dealing with thousands of couples who have struggled is an incredible experience. What is the most common thing that you hear when you're dealing with marriage counseling? What do they tell you, especially in this area of infidelity?
Well, most of them say, I never planned to do this. I did not go into this relationship thinking this. I didn't take this job hoping this would happen. So we find this element of surprise and where they've been kind of shocked or blindsided as it's kind of developed. It's not intentional in most of the cases, at least in the Christian community.
Yeah, that's true. What drove you to do this? I mean, this is a murky area, which people, dealing with people's darkest areas of life is not usually something that you're drawn to. But what drew you to it?
Well, when I was a young seminary grad and I was a youth pastor, and I'd only known 3 pastors at that point in my life. My family didn't come to Christ until later. And he ran off with a woman in the church. And that was the second time out of those first 3 pastors that had happened. So I tracked him down to Dallas, Fort Worth. He didn't want to come home. My friend and I drove back. We pulled the Hertz rental car in, and I leaned over to Paul and I said, Paul, when I get home, I'm going to go back to graduate school. I'm going to figure out why pastors do this. So that was in 1977, and I started in the local university taking prerequisite courses, and 5-6 years later graduated and didn't know a whole lot about this subject, but kept working at it, and over the years kind of put together some stuff that proves to be helpful.
Well, I so appreciate it. You've written this book, Anatomy of an Affair, and it is a great hands-on manual about how to do the best job you can do to affair-proof your marriage. Very practical. In the book, you talk about the close call. Describe what the close call is. I'm sure people innately know what that means, but what is it?
Oh, I don't think they do, Jan.
Okay, good. Okay. Go for it.
I think we're very innocent. When we surveyed all these pastors, 4,000 of them, they talked about being blindsided, bushwhacked, just had no idea that this is even developing. But in this culture, Men and women work together, they play together, they work out together, they minister together, and many times your spouse doesn't have that same interest. So over time, you just develop this admiration for the ministry they do, or how good they are at this or that, etc. And that gradually begins to develop into what we call a mood-altering experience. You look forward to going and seeing them. You might even begin to want to spend extra time with them, or to improve your skill set, or you'll save articles you'll take because your spouse doesn't care for that, or maybe CDs, or it just
Maybe
gradually...
plan your day around it.
Just plan your day around it.
Wow. So that's trouble. That's a flag.
It is. It is.
You speak of the 4 phases of the close call. Let's hit those. What are the 4 phases of the close call?
Well, first of all, there's a mood attraction involved in that. And being around this person brightens your day. And like I said, you look forward to it. And then you begin to get more involved in it, kind of entangled in the process. And then you might begin to realize, this is bad. We got to stop this. We got to get out of this. This is not good. But it becomes then kind of an intermittent thing, which is even more powerful in its bonding experience.
Why is that?
Well, intermittent reinforcement is a very powerful behavioral determinant. And what happens, it's like the monkey pulling the food bar. They never know when they're going to strike it rich. Or people go to Vegas pulling the one-armed bandit. You just never know.
Is that the emotional affair?
That's
what
the
people would
emotional
call
part,
the emotional
yeah.
affair. So there's nothing physical per se,
No.
but you're attracted.
No. But if you continue to stay close to that, you will move into a phase where you will begin to feed the relationship and you'll rob the marriage.
Wow. Yeah.
Feed the friendship, rob the marriage.
And people know this when it's happening.
They-
They just
at that
tend to
point-
ignore it?
At that point, they do. They think they can manage it. They feel like it's not worth saying anything about because it'd be very troublesome to everybody. They try to hide it, but it becomes a kind of a secret stash.
One of the others of the 4 is destabilization of relationship. Describe is that kind of the breakdown of the marriage side?
Well, that's kind of the breakdown of both the friendship sometimes. It's very abrupt. Maybe your children from both friends have been going to school together, and all of a sudden we got to cut this off. Sometimes it involves the marriage, changing friendships, moving away. Yeah, it's very difficult.
So we have that basis for the emotional relationship. Let's move to the next phase, which typically then becomes a physical relationship. In the book, Anatomy of an Affair, you describe 5 classes of this sexual betrayal or emotional and sexual betrayal. Let's go through those with illustrations. The first is the one-night stand.
Yep.
I mean, that is what it is. I think it's self-evident, but give us a story.
Well, David and Bathsheba would be a biblical story. No relationship, no prior interaction at all. Somebody goes to a conference or to a professional training experience. They're alone. Alcohol is almost always involved in this. They just become friends. They might go back to the same hotel if they're in a training conference. That's very dangerous. They might, hopefully different rooms, but it's just a one-night stand. It's kind of like a terrible experience.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, the thing here in our current context in the culture, Mike Pence, the vice president, was ridiculed for having established some boundaries around this kind of situation where he doesn't eat with a woman unless there's someone else present. He doesn't put himself in a position at the so-called training moment, right?
Yeah.
What you were describing there, a training, off-site, out-of-town kind of thing. I admire that. He was ridiculed for it, but I think the wisdom of it is now being shown with the things that have been happening in the culture. I mean, now there is wisdom, especially for the Christian community, to not place yourself in this position where the one-night stand can occur.
Yeah, this culture is very different than it was even 20 years ago. And you're just half of the equation. You don't know what the other half is bringing to the experience.
Yeah. The next is the Entangled Affair. Describe that.
Well, this is where you get emotionally involved and eventually physically or sexually involved. And a great illustration in the scriptures is Samson and Delilah. And we had this picture of his head in her lap, and they're talking back and forth. But he couldn't stay away from this woman, even though he knew she was trying to kill him.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
It just shows how powerful the attraction and the addiction is in that situation.
Dave, you used an illustration, a modern day one, in the book about Rob and Becky. Rob was in grad school, and at night he was going to classes, working full time during the day. Becky was doing well in her career, but she felt left out of her husband's life. So that isolation factor. She shared her frustrations with her boss, George. They began to get to know each other a bit better, and sure enough, they connected and had an affair. That's another angle. I feel discouraged. I don't feel involved in my spouse's life.
I'm not connected to them.
So
we
they
don't have
look
time together.
for connection. That's the entangled affair.
It is. And eventually, it's very nurturing and caring before it ever
It
becomes
feels
sexual.
good.
It feels good.
And be weary of that. Don't go headlong into that. Step back. When that feeling occurs, you should step back and say, what's happening to me?
So you kind of highlight there, Jim, the idea that you need to be aware of what's going on inside of you. It's not just the external things, the appearances, the dinners, the lunches. It's the feelings that matter.
All right, so we have the one-night stand, the entangled affair, as you've described it. Then we have sexual addiction, which is more prevalent today, I think, than ever before because of
More
the
available.
internet and anonymous ways to see it and look at it and experience. Talk about the sexual addiction issue.
Well, when I got into this years ago, I was thinking adultery was adultery was adultery. I was a seminary grad. I didn't know there were classes or differences. But when I read the Bible again through my 1 year reading, the Bible reading, I became, oh my gosh, that's this. So
it's right there.
Yeah, it is. Eli's sons were sexual addicts. They were prophets. They were priests. And they would select women out of the line of giving sacrifices, take them into tents, have sex with them, and dismiss them. And God told Eli, you need to stop that. And he didn't. So God took the lives of those two sons, and God also took Eli's life prematurely because he would not stop this behavior.
That's pretty bold, right?
That is pretty bold. You know, adultery is on God's top 10 list. I mean, it's right there.
It's so true.
It is.
But why do we, again, I'm trying to help the person that may be struggling in this area to prompt the questions in that direction. Why do we fall prey to not hearing that? We know that. That is so true.
It's the emotion. I keep saying it's what's going on inside of you that just kind of sweeps you off your feet. I'll give you a great illustration. Are you a car guy?
I like cars.
Okay. The car I drove in high school, okay, just sold at Barrett Jackson's auto auction for $200,000.
You should have kept that car.
I should have
Come
kept
on,
that
Dave.
car. Now,
You sold it for $500.
Yep, exactly. And I went on to something I thought was better.
Yeah, right. The Volkswagen.
That's right. But you know why that guy bought that car? He didn't buy that car. He's gained 100 pounds, lost all of his hair, got a big belly on him. But when he gets in that car and starts that engine, how old do you think he is?
16.
He's 16 years old dragging Main Street, you know? So it's the memories, it's the feelings that cause people to
But I got to ask you, what kind of car was it?
It was a 426 Plymouth.
Oh. Okay, good.
I know what that sounded like. I
Now
do.
you know we're car guys.
So along those lines, Dave, what's the pain or what's the emotion inside that leads to sexual addiction?
Well, it's the feeling of being, it actually becomes lust eventually, but initially it feels relief. There's sexual pleasure. There's all the chemicals that God built into the system that are released in sex, the oxytocin, everything else. It's just a flood of feelings that comes in that experience. And people usually start this way back in childhood experiences. There's a lot of childhood sexual injury, in cases. But it's looking for a self-medicating process.
Next, then, is the add-on affair. I don't know what that meant in your book. Like you're having an affair and you have another affair? Or what does the add-on affair mean?
No, the add-on is, to me, a marital void. Something that's missing in the marriage that you enjoy, you participate in, your spouse is not interested. Maybe we have a hiking club in our church. I use that as an illustration in the book, you know. Your wife doesn't like the outdoors. So you go to this hiking club and there's 20 of you and you go to these places and just have a hike, but you build a friendship gradually over time, see some of the same people there, and this relationship becomes an additional point of contact outside the marriage.
Now, some people, you're talking to two groups of people at least. You know, some are going to manage that well. They're never going to have an affair.
Yeah, exactly.
I love painting, and so I go to a painting class at the local junior college, and there's both men and women in this class, and you're going to manage that well. It doesn't attract you physically to somebody else. So those people are hearing this going, what's wrong with people if that's what they do? But there is a group of people where those connections, those similar interests, spark the oxytocin, the other things, and they begin to be attracted to the person that's attracted to the things that they're attracted to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. And you begin to feel like this person understands you
Knows
better
me
than
better.
Yeah, exactly.
I can hear all the words and the cliches, you know. I feel alive when I'm with that person.
Yeah, I got someone who really understands me,
But again, I want to be sure, Dave, that people are hearing us in addition to describing this and the rest of this time, and I want you to come back next time so we could talk more about this. I want that practical, what do I do? Okay, so if you're in that spot, even going back to sexual addiction, get help.
Yeah.
That's if you feel that, as Dave described your situation, that you are looking for that soothing comfort, you're into the internet pornography area. This may have started when you were a teen boy or maybe even a teen girl, who knows? You need help. I'll be that plain and blunt, especially for the Christian community, but for every human being. And we're here for you, and we want you to contact us. Dave, again, one night stand, entangled affair, sexual addiction, add-on affair, you've described all of those. The fifth is that reconnection. This is one we hear a lot about at Focus on the Family. These are the people that go back to class reunion online and
Facebook.
Describe the reconnection dilemma.
Yeah, it's where you go back and find an old girlfriend or a boyfriend just to kind of figure out maybe what happened or to them. Or
may start innocently.
Oh, very much so. It all starts innocently. But, you know, you don't have to grow the relationship there. It's already stored in your brain. And so you will awaken. If you stay in touch with that old girlfriend, boyfriend from adolescence for 30 days, you'll become confused about your marriage.
Yeah, that leapt off the pages of the book when I read that. It's those memories are stored up here.
Well, that's the car guy thing. You know, he's buying that car to feel like a teenager
Go
again.
back and be young again.
Exactly.
Well, that's dangerous.
Wow.
Let's move to some of the profiles that you described, the dangerous partner profile. What does that mean, the dangerous partner profile? How are you using it here, and what do we need to be aware of?
Well, the dangerous partner profile is a concept not tall, dark, and handsome or blonde, blue-eyed or anything like that. It's really built on some deficits or things you bring to your marriage that you might even be aware of, like family of origin deficits. Maybe you were raised by a single mom, or your dad abandoned the family, or maybe it has to do with your hobbies or interests. There's an immediate attraction there. Or maybe it has to do with things that happened to you as a child. It's this template of a person who seems to meet almost all your needs immediately. Immediately.
And that's a dangerous partner profile.
Everybody has one. You need to figure out what yours is.
Do you do that, if you're married, obviously, are you doing that privately, saying, okay, this is a person of the opposite sex that I'm going to avoid, and you actually think that through? Or do you actually talk that through with your spouse? What's the greater accountability?
I think both of them are necessary, okay? I think the spouse needs to know that you are aware of some of your own vulnerabilities. When I do Christian leadership training or mission conferences, everybody has one of these. So you need to figure it out ahead of time. And I'll tell you, it makes great interactions.
And this is your temperament, like you said. It's your temperament style. It's what you're attracted to. Extrovert attracts to introvert. Kind of those general combinations that most likely you and your spouse share as well.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, this would be threatening to a lot of folks, though, wouldn't it be?
Well, it's threatening whether they recognize it or not. That's what I would say, John. It's the danger. Why many of them go down because they haven't talked about it. They've never sat down and penciled it in.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it. Everybody has this template that they bring with them.
I actually think the opposite. I think it may bring comfort in a marriage that you get if you can talk that openly about it and say, this is the person I never want to be alone with. And this is the prototype.
Yeah.
And if your spouse is aware that you're aware of that, I would think that would be confidence builder.
It could be. It should be.
Have you seen it work that way?
I have seen it work that way.
Yeah.
And people who do this work and figure this out and do talk about it find it amazing. It's not so much that it's new. It's always been suspected by the spouse in most cases. But to hear each of you acknowledge it does. It builds protection.
Let's move to the next one, which is that emotionally charged friendship. This is probably very common.
Yeah.
Maybe the most common? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But describe that and what are the pitfalls, and give us an example.
Well, it's becoming even more common because, like I said, men and women are working together all the time. It begins to start out just altering your mood. You get an email, you get a text, you get a phone call, you meet somebody in the coffee shop at the workplace or something like that. And it begins to take on an emotional tone to it. You begin to anticipate it, look forward to it. And then you begin to actually try to grow it and develop it. And then it becomes kind of a third stage thing where you actually know you can go back to it and you'll get the charge you're looking for, like a great strong cup of coffee or something like that.
Dave, let me ask you for that example. Give us a story out of your book that illustrates this.
The longest emotionally charged friendship I've ever heard of was 30 years.
Wow.
Never sexual, never erotic, okay? It was a 2 p.m. afternoon phone call every single day of the week, okay?
By two people
By
of the
two
opposite
people
sex.
of the opposite sex, both married to other people. They never did anything together. They never went out to lunch or anything else. But he had actually been through 2 addiction treatment programs to try to break that because his adult children knew it was inappropriate. But he just couldn't give it up. It was so innocent, but so refreshing. 30 years of a 2 p.m. phone call.
Did he keep that secret?
No. Initially he did, but his wife found out about it and confronted him, said he was going to stop, couldn't stop, got caught again, finally entered a not a sexual addiction, but just an addiction treatment program trying to break it. The bondage of these kinds of relationships are so powerful. Mm-hmm. It's like the bright spot of the day. It's the mood lifter. It's the conversation, but you are robbing the marriage and you are feeding the friendship.
So if a person's caught in either of these, the dangerous partner profile, you're attracted, you haven't done that work to identify who you need to avoid at all costs, and you find yourself in that spot, how does a person begin to back up?
That's great. You get sober one day at a time with somebody who's going to be kind of a sponsor to you.
So you have to confess it to somebody you trust.
Confess it. You do. You have to engage. You can't do this by yourself. You can't do this in secrecy. This relationship addiction is very, very powerful. And then you need to be able to talk about it with your spouse. She's not your accountability partner, or he's not. Your husband's not your accountability partner. But you need to be able to discuss this.
Well, the fear of that, obviously, is that will end your relationship, your marital relationship. Yeah. Is that just a risk you need to take?
Well, it's like with any addiction. It is probably a risk you need to take, and actually your spouse already is aware of it. In their gut. They sense some of this is going on. Huh. And so the fact that you can acknowledge it is great, but you need to put whatever you need to put on your phone, on all the implements, the devices you use that keep you from getting involved.
Right. Share the internet when you're on. There's software or apps that will do that. That's a good thing.
Yeah. I would actually say I don't like the term accountability groups. I like the term vulnerability groups, where all the guys in the group are equally vulnerable, because this is not just one guy's problem. Everybody shares this.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
The other one you mentioned is the seductive personality pattern. Describe that. I think I understand what that is, but tell us.
Well, our culture is growing a larger number of people who come into adulthood with definite entitlement experiences or definite needs, and they're looking for people to fix these needs. They're looking for a relationship, the perfect spouse, someone who will satisfy them, someone who will put them back together again. In fact, people who wear rings are attractive to them because, well, you help this person develop some happiness, maybe you could help me instead. So they have to actually go after married people many times as a way of comforting themselves and reassuring themselves and trying to heal this. We have a rule in therapy, though. If the injury happens before the relationship, it's your job to heal the injury. No spouse will ever fix something like that in your life. It's impossible.
I mean, that's a good point.
It is.
I think we continue to seek for the spouse's desire to heal us.
Yeah,
and that's
they can't.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
In that context, you talk about the narcissistic personality disorder. Describe that. We're wrapping up here, but I want to get this in.
Well, this is the person who has a great sense of entitlement. There's a lot of grandiosity. They feel like they need to be adored, high levels of attraction. They need people to elevate them and hold them up in high
So they want to
esteem.
be center stage.
They want to be center stage, yep.
And the way they find to
Yeah.
meet that need is to seduce or
They go after somebody who's really attractive or whoever they think can help
they
them.
want you to like me.
They want you to like, and they will say things like, if you weren't married, we could really be a great couple.
Yes.
Okay. So they will go after those kinds of people.
Well, it's so true. The other you mentioned is borderline personality disorder. Now, this is deep stuff,
Yeah.
mental illness.
Yep.
But you have the narcissist, and then you have this borderline personality disorder. Describe that and the danger of that.
Well, the borderline is one who has a very limited sense of self, who she is and what she needs and everything else. And there's a lot of volatility in mood. There's looking for someone to love them and adore them. You're never enough. They will eventually turn on you and throw you under the bus. But they just seem like what you've always been looking for initially. Both of these.
Man, Dave, you have packed it in today. I mean, we've gotten through a lot of the questions I wanted to ask, but there is so much more we need to talk about. Let's come back next time and talk more about this important topic. Can we do that?
Oh, I'd love to.
Let's do it.
Hey, I'm John Fuller, and thanks for watching. Get more info about Focus over here and more from our guests over there, and be sure to subscribe to our channel as well.